Hi, I'm Dr. Christy Pretti-Frontczak, and this training video is called Classroom Clean Sweep. And what it's really designed to do is to take a look at the learning environment and make sure that we're differentiating and promoting inclusive practices just by the toys and materials and arrangement in our room. So we're going to explore several different ways, 5 in particular, that we can really increase inclusive learning environments where we can differentiate just based upon the toys and materials that are available for children. So the 5 ways that we can increase inclusive learning environments, the way we can bolster or boost our differentiation is through engagement, function and relevance, level of independence, novelty, and the degree to which the toys and materials allow children to be self-directed and have choice. So let's unpack each one. So let's start with engagement. This is probably my favorite one, but it's also the most complicated in the sense that there's 2 sides to it. There's a toy or an object in the classroom, and it either has an opportunity to promote engagement or it has an opportunity for misbehavior. So let's start on the one side of the coin about engagement first. So the way that we get engagement and the way that we critique a toy or an object within our classroom is to look to see that it has different ways that the child can interact and explore and learn from it. So we want to really think about multiple senses here. You'll see themes of universal design throughout. We didn't pull that out as a separate criterion or aspect because it's interwoven throughout these different elements of creating inclusive learning environments and differentiating through the toys and materials. But again, having multiple senses activated really engages the learner. The more open-ended the materials or the toys are, the more we become engaged because we find our own path. We're also looking for feedback because if I don't quite know if I'm doing it right or wrong, or if I need more support and there's no feedback there, I can become disinterested and I can lack engagement. The ZPD is the zone of proximal development, and this is really from Vygotsky's work, that we want to make sure that there's enough of a challenge, but that it's not too much that I become disengaged. And that'll bring us to, does the toy or material create an opportunity for misbehavior? And so definitely if it's boring, it's just something to look at or just something to touch or just something to feel, then it becomes more kind of unidimensional and it can lead to boredom. You have to be a little careful here too, though. You don't want to overstimulate children, and you don't want to make them confused of what the relevant stimuli is. But again, you want to make sure that there's this balance between the multiple senses are being fired and called upon, and that we don't want to lead to boredom where there's just sort of the single avenue. Same thing, we don't want things to be too challenging where a child feels frustrated or isn't quite sure what to do next, so they sort of give up. The last 2 are my favorite ways to think about opportunities that lead to misbehavior, because oftentimes we think inclusion is going to be a challenge because of kids' challenging behaviors, when really it's our challenge to create learning environments that all students can thrive in. And so when the environment is competitive, and what I mean by that is there's not enough space, so there's too many kids at a table, or there's one high interest toy but only one, and only one kid can play with it at a time, or when we have certain sections of the room that are closed off or limited to the number of children who can play at a time. This creates this air of competition. And we start to struggle between whose turn is it, how long can I be there? And while this is important stuff for kids to learn in terms of fairness and this idea of waiting my turn and so forth, we want to make sure that we've given kids the opportunity to act when they're excited and engaged, and not to have to always engage in impulse control. So that's that last one. Does it really act like a thief? So it uses up my ability as a 4-year-old to engage in impulse control because I'm repeatedly being asked asked to wait and to do it later, and that I don't really want that right now, and that it's not my turn. Every time that I get that message, a little bit more of my tolerance and my ability to control my impulses are kind of stolen. And so we want to make sure that those times when I really do need to draw upon my limited reserve of impulse control, that I have something in reserve to utilize. But if I've used it up all day long because I've been told stop or no or later or not yet, then it's going to create this opportunity for misbehavior. When we think about function and relevance, we really want to think about maybe even rating something on a scale. I also like to think of the traditional TV show that was called Clean Sweep, where we put things into 3 piles or label them as 3 things. They're either so broken and outdated and unused that we really just need to throw them away. A second pile can be, to a good home, somebody else could use them, but the kids that I'm serving, their abilities, their age, their interests, their demographic, it's just not a good match. So this might be something we can repurpose or share out, but it's not for my classroom this year. And then the last pile is definitely a keep pile. This is totally relevant. This is totally functional. So again, you can rate things maybe on a Likert scale from 0 to 5, or you can literally make 3 piles where you're saying, yep, totally relevant, sort of, but not for my kids, and not at all. So when you're thinking about that rating scale or which pile to put a toy or materials into, the side where you'd want to get rid of it, either to throw it away or to repurpose it to a good home, is if it's confusing. And it might not have been confusing for last year's kids or the morning kids, but it definitely is confusing for this year's kids or the afternoon kids. And oftentimes there's not time to change our environment between morning and afternoon. However, our kids are really different. We also think about things that are just too challenging, or maybe they're just broken. They're outdated and old. They were something that we've been using, for 25 years in our classroom, and just have never really updated it. We're singing the same song or reading the same nursery rhyme or doing the same puzzle, whereas we really need to become more contemporary. It also might be materials and toys that are based upon a publisher's interest. It's their theme, it's their artist, it's their whoever they've outsourced something to, but it's not really relevant to the kids that we're working with in the demographic, age, and ability. But the keeper, the ones we want to hold on to, are things that are clear about how to play with them and clear what you're going to be able to teach a child by having them engage with it. They're really accessible to all kinds of learners. They are relevant to this century, and they're really based upon this group of kids' interest. So that's what we mean by functional and relevant. So we want to make sure that they're functioning, they're not putting kids to sleep, and they're also relevant for their needs, their ability, their age, their demographic. The next one is really looking at the level of independence that children can have as they play with toys and materials. We often say that the environment is the third teacher, and are we really letting that environment teach? So we often talk about self-correcting materials, and I actually have a board on Pinterest that you can follow for self-correcting materials. And the 6 things on your slide here are what makes something self-correcting. So one thing you could do in your clean sweep is literally just rate the toys in terms of the degree to which they meet the characteristics of self-correcting. And that would lead to independence. That really allows the child to do things that don't require you or even a peer mediator. But you also might want to rate them and say, okay, there are some toys that might need a little bit of support. They might need a peer mediator, they might need a little bit of scaffolding or a model or something, even a demo, so children know what to do with it, and then they can go and be more independent. And then lastly, how many of your toys and materials require you, require an expert, require a guide, require your involvement? And so when you look at that continuum of a child being able to engage very independently, it meets these criteria for self-correcting versus going to need some support, some scaffolding, some modeling, versus I got to be there doing it hands-on with the kid, you can sort of begin to see where things are going to break down in the classroom. The last 2 are definitely things you can rate. So one is about novelty and one is about degree of choice. The novelty is one that we say proceed with caution, because you don't want something to be so novel that it either scares the kids, confuses the kids, overwhelms them in some way. So this is not always like, if it's brand new and super weird, that's even better. It's just enough novelty to get the neurons to fire, then to wire. So you want to be careful and watch that you're tempering the amount of novelty to the learner and to the child. The other one is the degree of choice. And so this is really thinking about how much choice do children have. And there's anything from forced choice, here's two options, to open-ended choice, where kids can really decide when they want to do something, where they want to do something, who they're going to do, how long they're going to be there. And so each of those elements, from what you're doing with the toy, to how long you get to do it with the toy, to when you even get to play with that toy, is an element of choice. And we want to make sure that our day has plenty of opportunities for child choice, because again, the more child choice, the more the neurons are firing and the more they're wiring. Again, some kids may need visual supports to help make a choice. You might need to reduce the options so that they can pick between things, but always make sure that when it's a more forced choice, that it's something that is actually of interest to the child. When they don't make a choice, it's not often because they can't. Their choice of non-choice is the choice, right? So if I'm picking between two things and I pick neither, that is my choice. I don't want to do either. I don't want to play with you. I don't want to play with that. I don't want to play with them. I don't want to play in that way. And so again, we want to make sure that we give kids opportunities to express that choice, to recognize what they're interested in, what they feel successful with, what they enjoy doing, versus always having to follow our lead and our agenda. So those are the simple ways that we can do a clean sweep of our classroom. Again, the idea is to create more inclusive learning environments, to really bolster and boost our differentiation. We talked about increasing engagement, looking at the function and the relevance of the toys and the objects, looking at the level of independence so that we have the third teacher really active and engaged themselves, that being the environment, that we think about the degree to which the items and materials are novel to kids, and choice is available, which allows for the neurons to fire and to wire. So if you're interested in doing your own clean sweep, or you'd like to talk further about how you might go about this in your own practice, feel free to contact me at christypf.com, and we can set up a time for a personalized clean sweep of your classroom.